Safaris through ancestral memories teach me many things. The patterns are the patterns. Liberal bigots are the ones who trouble me most. I distrust the extremes. Scratch a conservative and you find someone who prefers the past over any future. Scratch a liberal and find a closet aristocrat. It's true. Liberal governments always develop into aristocracies. The bureaucracies betray the true intent of people who form such governments. Right from the first, the little people who formed the governments which promised to equalize the social burdens found themselves suddenly in the hands of the bureaucratic aristocracies. Of course, all bureaucracies follow this pattern, but what hypocrisy to find even under a communized banner. Well, if patterns teach me anything, it's that patterns are repeated. My oppressions, by and large, are no worse than any of the others, and, at least, I teach a new lesson. The stolen journals.
A lesson, it seems, is not learned in the latest adaptation of Dune. A liberal bigotry and hypocrisy in a double standards when it comes to race and gender swapping of Frank Herbert's characters, and a lesson creativity in the production. Of course, that's not all that bigotry has infected. Star Wars, DC, MCU, Star Trek, The Predator have all fallen under the woke umbrella of the leftist Hollywood. No franchise is safe under the unregressives. They are relentless in their pursuit to insert their ideology into our culture. If it's not woke, it will not be made. It is their agenda to take a property and vandalize it in its meeting. Nothing is sacred to them, only their message, no matter how unregressive it is. Frank Herbert Dune is next on the list. This is clear in the latest trailer that they have no care for the source material whatsoever. Starting with the opening, that has Chani narrating instead of Ulan. Ulan was the original chronicler of Dune and Dune Messiah. However now, in order to be unaggressive, it can't be a white woman but a black woman to tell the story of Frank's vision. Authors are intentional in what is happening in their story. Nothing is random, and in Dune, Frank's characters weigh up each and every action they take as if their lives depended on it, which as it stands, it does. Ulan is the daughter of Padishan Emperor IV. During the events, Ulan was the one investigating the events that transpired on planet Arrakis, which is how she became the narrator of the story, because she knew what had happened. She learnt from the investigations that she instigated on her homeworld, and also from her father herself. So she learned of the betrayal by House Conan, which absolutely undestroyed the Atreides. Not Chani. Chani had nothing to do with the events between House Atreides and House Conan during the start of the story. She only became relevant halfway through the story when Paul and her met in the deep desert. And judging by the trailer, it is making Chani to be the focal point of Paul's story, when she was merely a background character, a supporting character. Her goal was to support Paul in his choices and to give him a reason to continue with his goals. I mean, despite how evil they might seem. Paul originally resisted the Golden Path because he knew what that meant, and he knew what sacrifice he would have to make in order to create that change. And then it was a sacrifice he was unwilling to make, considering all of the atrocities that have happened in his name during the jihad. With no care to the source material, they have changed the race and the sex of Liat kinds for no other reason than because.
Yeah, well then tell them we're just not interested. Oh hey, token!
Because there's no valid reason. They have tried to justify it better when they said in a Vanity Fair interview where Sharon Duncan Brewster said,
"What Dennis had stated to me was there was a lack of female characters in his cast, and he had always been very feminist, pro-women, and wanted to write the role for a woman. This human being manages to basically keep the peace amongst many people. Women are very good at that, so why can't Kynes be a woman? Why shouldn't Kynes be a woman?"
It's that Liet isn't a woman. Would they have the same cavalier attitude if, say, Wonder Woman was changed to a white man? No. And is this supposed to be Stilgar, the mentor to Paul, in the ways of the Fremen and the original leader after Liet Kyne's murder at the hands of the Conans? In order for these social elitists to appease themselves, they must remove anything that is white, because they believe anything white is a sin or a crime. However, it's not just removing a race, it is removing their culture to replace it with another one. And the Fremen are Egyptian by way of origin, and the majority of the Egyptian population isn't this. No, they are more like this. Their goal, it seems, is to remove a written history by way of decanonizing the canon when it doesn't suit their needs, while at the same time they will scream like a drunk troll when the race swap is the other way around, as if it's their way or no way, and despite the ethical and moral liberties they have shown when it is presented the other way around. And then there's Paul. Paul here doesn't look capable of beating anyone in a fight.
But everything important happens when we're awake. Look at you. Put on some muscle?
I did?
No.
In the end, in order for Paul to rule, he had to fight Feyd-Rautha of House Icona in Canley. Feyd-Rautha was built to fight and his body was turned into a weapon. Size and muscle does matter. Paul has muscle but nothing like Feyd-Rautha's. Paul, even with his powers, struggled to defeat such a monster. Feyd-Rautha would have won by sheer strength and will. However, to be sure, Feyd-Rautha attempted to steal victory by using a hidden blade. Paul had to use subterfuge by telling Feyd-Rautha that they were cousins, and this truth undistracted Feyd-Rautha enough to give Paul an opening to win.
Cousin.
That doesn't change the fact that this Paul doesn't look like he'd even stand a chance. And with the advances in CGI over the past 50 years, they have turned the practical effects of the sandworms from the 80s into a butthole. Is this the imagination level of modern directors? The original design was based on real worms, and as you notice, these worms have mouths. These new worms look like they will suck up sand like a vacuum with no vent for the sand to disperse. And to use the excuse that it's just fiction doesn't work. In fiction, what is happening in the scene or in a book has to make sense, whether it is biological, technical, astronomical, or magical. This vision Paul is having in the future makes no sense when it comes to the worm in the background. The worms attack anything in their path, and yet we see Paul and the Fremen fighting in the foreground. The worm would attack them, Paul included. The Fremen do ride worms, however. That doesn't change the fact that this is stupid to fight right in front of them. Another bizarre choice here is the Power Ranger costumes in the battle they are wearing. This is more signs of modern glitz and glamour but with no substance or reason. This battle would attract the worms, which you would argue that is what happened in the scene. However, every action the characters take is calculated, and Paul wouldn't be so stupid to attract a worm in the middle of a fight. The writers of this movie have no idea about anything of Frank Herbert Dune. It's not hard to see that this is not Dune. Another excuse for corporate Hollywood to disembowel another franchise. The lack of creativity is beyond evident here. They have already begun dissecting the Lord of the Rings with their woke politics, asserting the gay narrative where none existed before, and now they're doing the same thing with Dune with the race and gender swapping of pre-established characters. It seems their aim is to continue to assimilate and destroy anything and everything until there is nothing left of Western culture. The only question now is what is next for the woke hit mob. If you enjoy this, check out the website below for more commentary, movie reviews and short stories. Until then,
Don't try your powers on me.